Guardians, Into the Light is here, and with it comes a brand new game mode, Onslaught, where you'll be fighting wave after wave of enemies, truly testing your capabilities as a Guardian. Today, we're covering the top 4 Hunter builds that will absolutely dominate Legend Onslaught. These builds will focus on clearing out as many enemies as possible, while at the same time offering you survivability and the potential to melt bosses and mini-bosses. These builds offer options for crowd control to slow down your enemies, and ways to lock down lanes, stopping those enemies from reaching your ADU. So rally your fellow Guardians, prepare your arsenal, and join us as we explore the top 4 Hunter builds designed to dominate PvE content in Destiny 2. Remember to leave a like if you find this video helpful, and if you like seeing build videos and other Destiny 2 helpful content, consider hitting that subscribe button. With that being said, let's jump right on into it. Legend Onslaught is no joke. The sheer amount of enemies plus the numerous bosses can make it difficult to choose between high single target damage and great ad clearing potential. Well, my solar one-shot build has you covered. It does a perfect balancing act of clearing out a ton of ads while at the same time decimating bosses. This build is perfect for getting through those tough Tormentor and Demolitionist rounds. With Celestial Nighthawk, we're offered the capability to shoot one powerful shot with our super. So I like to save that shot for any and all bosses that will appear. That way you can easily wipe out pesky Tormentors, Demolitionists, or even Sky Bombers. We then focus on amping up our ad clearing potential, and we do this with a few different methods. The first being Gunpowder Gamble. This builds up by getting any solar related kills. Once you have it ready, you'll see your grenade icon change, and you can throw a mini stick of dynamite that will deal massive damage. This is amazing for Onslaught since there are so many yellow bar enemies. And the next way we amp this up is by bringing Sunshot. Sunshot has to be one of the best primaries out there for clearing out ads and using it to charge up your Gunpowder Gamble. And what's the flow for this build? Well, the flow goes like this: shoot everything and spam your abilities. It's really that simple. You have everything from Sunshot, 2 grenades, and near infinite knives to go crazy with. We do bring 5 fragments that synergize really well together. With Ember of Searing and Mercy, we can create fire sprites by killing scorched targets. We then get restoration by picking up those fire sprites. So we add in Ember of Solace and Empyrean, so that way you have a longer uptime on that restoration and you can extend it with solar kills. And finally, we bring Ember of Torches to easily gain Radiant and give it to our teammates. Because we have Gunpowder Gamble, you can bring a solar grenade for extra damage, but if you are finding it a little bit harder to survive, you can bring that healing grenade for on-demand healing, but that's purely up to you. I like the solar grenade better. And how do we improve this build? Well, I like to shoot for 100 resilience and discipline. The rest of your stats aren't too important, so I like to bring a blend of about 50 to 60 in recovery and intellect. And as we mentioned before, Sunshot is our primary weapon for this build, and if you don't have it, you can bring any other solar primary with Incandescent. That way you can take advantage of scorching more targets and causing more explosions, while at the same time getting your Gunpowder Gamble back even quicker. In my heavy slot, I typically like to take a solar rocket with bipod. That way we can deal with numerous ads and deal with overload champions. And for the primary slot, I like to bring a crowd control weapon, like a disorienting grenade launcher. That way I have excellent damage and additional crowd control. Celestial Nighthawk is phenomenal for dealing with bosses and mini-bosses. Between Sunshot and Gunpowder Gamble, we have massive ad clearing potential. This build honestly is just so much fun to use. Definitely give it a shot. Like we mentioned in last week's Onslaught video for Warlocks, there is one build for Hunters that everyone also asks for. That's the Orpheus Rig Tether Hunter. Orpheus rigs allow you to use your tether, and for every enemy that gets tethered, you get super energy back up to 50%. But this does only give you super energy when you're using Deadfall Tether, which is the better option anyway. So just make sure to use that one over Mobius Quiver. Since Onslaught has enemies from each wave spawn in roughly 3 spots that are close by, this means we can tether one spot and lock down the entire area, meaning all enemies will be suppressed and take a ton of damage. This is absolutely amazing in Onslaught. It gives you time to clear out enemies and makes them easier to kill. We improve this even further by bringing mods like Dynamo, Ashes to Assets, Firepower, Reaper, and Harmonic Siphon to create a ton of orbs and get more super energy back by dodging near enemies and killing with your grenades. But it doesn't stop there. We also bring the fragments Echo of Reprisal so that we get even more super energy by getting kills when you're surrounded. All of this pairs perfectly with Orpheus rigs to help us get our super back in no time. So what's the flow for this build? Well, the flow goes like this: pop your tether near where the ads spawn, throw a grenade to wipe out that set and gain volatile rounds, and more super energy. Start mowing down the field with Graviton Lance and pop your tether when you get it back. we bring aspects like Stylish Executioner and Trapper's Ambush to gain invisibility more often and be able to weaken a group of adds while going invisible. This means we can use Trapper's Ambush at will to immediately gain invisibility in case we're in trouble, or if you need to weaken enemies that sneak by your tether. Then use your dodge to gain a second melee charge that will let you go invisible again. This is also perfect for that spark running section, since you can stay invisible and easily dunk the spark. And how can we improve this build? Well, for stats, I like to shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline. Then I go for about 60 in strength and intellect. Grenades are super powerful, so we want them on a short cooldown, but we also want a short cooldown for our tether and invis. But we have ways to get both of those back pretty quick, which is why I'm only going for about 60 to 70 in those. For weapons, Graviton Lance is amazing. It already does a ton of damage, but with its ability to create infinite explosions, it's perfect for Onslaught. If you don't have it, then I do recommend a Void Primary with Repulsor Brace or Demolitionist. I do like to bring a crowd control weapon like a Disorienting Grenade Launcher in that primary slot. That way I can deal excellent damage and disorient any enemies that aren't in my tether. Since we have increased Void weapon damage with our Void Surge, we want a Void Heavy, and my favorite is going to be a Void Rocket, so I can stun Overload champions, but also take advantage of volatile rounds. With this build, you can get onto any team that you want. You provide a ton of support while also creating a ton of orbs and clearing out mass amounts of enemies. This is the #1 build for Onslaught for many people. The next build on our list is a Strand Hunter build, and Strand Hunter causes absolute mayhem when it comes to Onslaught. I thought about bringing my Decoy Assassin build, but with how many exploders there are in Onslaught, I decided to go a different route. This time I'm bringing the 6th Coyote. That way we get 2 dodges to use on command. We then take the Aspect Threaded Spectre and Gambler's Dodge to create a decoy and get our melee back whenever we dodge. Since this decoy spawns threadlings when it's destroyed, we want this build to revolve around 3 things. Number 1, spawn as many decoys to pull away attention and deal more damage. Number 2, spawn as many threadlings as possible and amp up their damage even further to all enemies. And number 3, suspend anyone and everyone. That way we can keep enemies close together and deal more AoE damage. As we mentioned, we have the 6th Coyote, so spawning a ton of decoys is covered. For threadlings, we want to bring a weapon with Hatchling to create even more threadlings. And this is paired perfectly with the artifact mod, Horde Shuttle, where we create a ton of threadlings just by using our weapons. So we bring the fragment Thread of Evolution to increase their damage. And for our third part, we want to bring a Shackle Grenade and the Wish Keeper. See, the Wish Keeper is perfect for Onslaught, especially with this build, because you can easily suspend targets. It can also get the Hatchling Catalyst, meaning you can create even more threadlings, while locking down lanes with its trap. Amongst all the damage that you will be causing with your threadlings, we add in one more very powerful thing. That is the Aspect Whirling Maelstrom. Now you can throw or shoot a tangle and it will become a Beyblade that spins around dealing damage and unraveling everything in sight. Because we can suspend targets, we throw this Beyblade and it will continuously deal damage, leaving your enemies no room to escape. So what's the flow for this build? Well, there's no real flow for this build. Pretty much just use your abilities as much as possible, and any downtime you have, create suspending traps with Witchkeeper. In the meantime, throw any tangles you see. We bring mods that will help with our weapon damage, ability regeneration, and orb creation. So for stats, I like to shoot for 100 in resilience and discipline, and then I like to shoot for 50 in strength and mobility, so we can have a pretty high uptime with all of our abilities. There are a few weapons that really help this build become even stronger, and as I mentioned, Wishkeeper is the #1 option because of its ability to suspend and create threadlings. However, if you don't have Wishkeeper, bring another Strand weapon with Hatchling, or Quicksilver Storm can be pretty good too. I also like the Indebted Kindness as a heavy hitting sidearm that will take care of barrier champs. Getting a roll with Volt Shot means you'll be able to take care of overload champs and deal even more AoE damage. Finally, I like to bring a rocket in my heavy slot, especially one with Bipod. That way we can guarantee taking care of overload champs and wiping out tougher targets like breaks. The Semiotician is a Strand rocket that can roll with field prep and Bipod, which is phenomenal for this build. This build is amazing at clearing out a ton of enemies and slowing down tougher targets. With your super, you can traverse large areas with ease, making it perfect for waves with mines or multiple sky bombers. This build is a ton of fun, so definitely give it a shot. Everyone and their brother wants an Orpheus Rig Hunter, but I actually think there might be a better build, and that is the Luckymec Lucky Pant's Void Hunter build. There's a reason why this build was used by the first person to clear solo Legend Onslaught. Lucky Pants lets you amp up your hand cannon damage to extreme levels, meaning you can melt any target at a moment's notice. With Tether and Void Hunter, we get all of the same advantages from the Orpheus Riggs build, with a slower cooldown on our super. We already touched on how powerful Tether is for Onslaught, so there's no need for me to dive into that again. If you have a Phoenix Protocol Warlock on your team, then you'll be able to shred everything and stay alive. In the off chance that you don't have a well on your team, we bring a few fragments and mods to power up this build even further. So we bring fragments like Echo of Vigilance and Obscurity, so we can go invisible by performing a finisher, and we gain overshield by getting a kill with our shield depleted. This helps out massively with our survival, and I do love to run Buried Bloodline to proc Devour, but if you don't have it, don't worry. We'll also take Echo of Harvest to gain Devour whenever we pick up an orb. Orbs will be super useful for getting our super back, but we also add in kinetic weapon surge mods to amp up our Lucky Pants damage even further and deal massive damage with our hand cannons. You can melt absolutely everything. Unstoppable champs, they get shredded. Those pesky shriekers that randomly show up, they get melted. Even bosses and mini bosses all get melted with this build. So what's the flow for this build? Well, the flow goes like this. Make sure your hand cannon is reloaded. You put it away and then you pull it back out and you get the illegally modded buff for 10 seconds. During this time, each hit up to 10 hits will increase its damage by 60%, which maxes out at 600% damage. When you include all of your potential buffs and debuffs, ranging from Radiant to Weapon Surge and Weakening, I've seen shots from Warden's Law hitting for 40 to 50,000 per bullet. The amazing part is that all you have to do is wait for your 10-second out of luck debuff to go away, and then you can do it all over again. So to improve this build, for stats, I like to shoot for 100 resilience and discipline. And then I go for about 60 in strength and intellect. Grenades are super powerful, so we want them on a short cooldown, and then we also want a short cooldown for our tether and invisibility. When it comes to weapons, Warden's Law is my favorite hand cannon to use, but you can use any kinetic or void hand cannon. I'd look for ones that have perks like Vorpal or Frenzy to have a damage buff active, and something like 4 times the charm, reconstruction, or another reload perk is best paired with that. For a secondary, I really like the Buried Bloodline for the ability to proc Devour and Weakening, but you could run any weapon to help out with your ad clearing potential. I then like to bring a Rocket for those overload champions and increase our ad clearing potential even further. This build is actually so easy to use for how powerful it is. Shred any target on demand while still having all the perks of being on Tether Hunter. And there you have it, Guardians. I will be covering some of these builds with in-depth guides on how everything works, so be on the lookout for those. Remember, mastering these builds is only the beginning. Experiment with different combinations, tweak your loadouts to suit your playstyle, and never stop honing your skills. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed seeing a new perspective, feel free to like the video and comment below what you might change or how you'd improve these builds. What build do you think is best for the new Onslaught mode? Keep an eye out for future videos as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of Destiny 2. Until then, may the threads of fate be ever in your favor. This is Luckymec signing off. See you on the next adventure, Guardians.